If you're looking to start dry January or your goal is just to balance your alcohol intake, then welcome to the Mindset Mirror Connection podcast. In today's episode, we're going to talk about actionable insights, education, and information that are going to help you have a better relationship with alcohol intake. So if you're ready, listen up and lean in as we elevate your mind.
I always think of T-Pain, blame it on the alcohol, baby.
Well, I've done that often. For those of you who are new to this podcast, we are going to chat about our lives, things we're watching on TV, our families, etc. So if you want to move past that, check out the show notes below to see when we start our conversation about alcohol intake. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell to stay updated on our empowering conversations like this one. Speaking of blaming it on things, I watched Aaron Rodgers' documentary called Enigma. I left the documentary actually pleasantly surprised. I talked about this in the webinar. So his whole conversation really was, if we look at it from our lens, about perfectionism and how he has been a perfectionist. And he goes, perfectionism leads to self-loathing.
Excuse me.
It leads to self-loathing, feeling like you can always do more. And in his perfectionism, he lost himself, his spiritual practice. He was raised in like a very conservative religious home where it was like, you're either good or you're not. And he took that into his career. He has done soul searching through ayahuasca, ketamine, other medicines. I hate when they call it medicine. Mm-hmm. It's not medicine. It's a psychedelic drug. I guess, sure. But just the amount of peace and acceptance and like things that he has discovered about himself and how this practice has helped him. I want to do ayahuasca so bad.
He inspired you.
He did. I would never want to do ayahuasca because it sounds miserable. Right. I don't know though, because like some of it was like him pushing. It almost comes back to like a David Goggins type of thing in his, like ayahuasca is one thing. I also believe in ketamine therapy. There's a lot of research on ketamine therapy, which I would also like to do. Mm-hmm. But sitting in like a steamed tent for 2 hours doesn't sound like fun for me.
No.
And I don't need to push myself through discomfort that bad. I do that.
People who died in Sedona.
Yes. And it was through one of the spiritual gurus in The Secret, the guy that was who coordinated it. So he went to prison.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Huh. And I followed because I really John Asaraf is someone else. But I watched his documentary after the fact, like after he got out of prison and like what he learned from the experience of like he gained all this notoriety from The Secret and then kind of wasn't being true to himself. And then this bad thing happened and he had to take another look at himself. So again, learning from what's happened in our lives. But the Enigma, it's interesting. I will say there is a bit of a lack of like self accountability.
Shocking.
Where because he remember that COVID thing where he was like, I'm immunized, but he worked with a naturopath.
Right.
Whereas the NFL wanted the vaccines. Now, if I was him, I'd just be like, I've chose to work with natural ways of managing my immune system. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I mean, you think of Tom Brady, who's like, I don't put anything bad in my body. Everyone like puts him on a pedestal. Whereas if Aaron Rodgers is like, I choose not to vaccinate myself, but I'm also doing other things to ensure that my immune system is strong and trying more natural approaches to managing COVID. I think he wouldn't have gotten so much slack.
Right.
But he's like, well, if they would have asked me the question afterwards, I would have answered it. It's like, no, that's not how it works, buddy. So definitely something to watch. I'd love to hear everyone's opinion on it.
Okay.
Unless you're a Vikings fan, because then you're just like, fuck this guy.
Yeah. No, I'll watch it because I'm curious for the drugs of it. But I watched
Yeah.
so my mom was over hanging out with the baby I don't know, the other day. And she's like, let's put on that Mormon show that everybody's talking about. And I was like, okay. So we thought it was more of
Had you watched it before? Okay.
because I don't really watch reality TV. And I'm very into Gossip Girl right now.
I know.
I'm knee deep.
Noticed.
I know, it's so stupid. And Michael's into it now too. So it's like very stupid. No, I haven't seen it before because I don't really watch what's it called? Reality TV. So we put it on and we thought it was like more of a documentary thing because I didn't know what to expect. But it's, not. It's like the Real Housewives essentially of Utah is what I would call it.
There is a Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, which
is there? Okay. So just now with I guess people who identify as Mormon, but I'm also confused. So we've only seen one episode. Let me just preface that.
Okay.
And I was like, what the fuck is happening here? Because again, I'm not on TikTok, so I had no idea that there was like a whole mom talk thing.
Yeah.
Which is ironic because I think I was doing a post the day before and it like came up like as a suggestion for mom talk. And I was like, oh, that's funny. And then when they put it, I was like, oh, I didn't know that was like a Mormon TikTok slogan. So
yeah,
they're something else. They have a lot of feelings. A lot of their problems are probably their own problems. And then also that one guy where he was cheating on her, like on Tinder and whatnot.
Right.
I was like, what the fuck is happening? Like, that's not very Mormon. Not
of
that I'm
you.
judging Mormon people. And I only know so much about that religion, but like none of this is very Mormon-y.
Yeah. No, it's not. It's interesting as the show goes on of like the angels versus the devils or whatever they call themselves, like the ones who are like kind of breaking the rules of the church. But I mean, when you're looking at the church in itself, women have never been seen as equal, even though the women who are knee deep say, no, that's not true. I had a very close friend who was Mormon that I went through graduate school with. We ended up getting our first jobs together out of school together. Wonderful human. Love her so much. Taught me a lot about the religion, but that was true. Like I can't go to the same heaven as my husband or I'm going to say it wrong. So please forgive me. But there is something empowering about, even though it's this silly bullshit that these women are like, no, like I divorced my husband because he was abusive or he was demeaning, which is frowned upon in the church. And basically you're making this choice to divorce someone because they're not treating you fairly.
Right.
Even if that means you're not going to quote unquote, like go to high heaven or whatever it is. But yeah, it's kind of also ridiculous. Like the girl who she like gets drunk and like,
oh yeah, the domestic abuse thing. And then like
abuse,
she was
swinging.
And then she's all pregnant with him. I'm like, what the fuck? Like,
yeah, she ends up having a baby with him.
Yeah. And I was like, her mom made some good points, but then I was like, but she wasn't very helpful because she'd be like, well, you shouldn't be in this situation. It's like, then why are you in the car with her driving? Like if you don't approve of her lifestyle so much, then don't sit in the car telling her how you don't approve. Just don't participate. Like, if you're not helping, like, and so, it was wild. I was like, okay. And so now every time she comes over to watch the baby, that's what we're going to watch.
Love that.
Yeah.
We watched Enigma. We watched this other show that I was like kind of bummed. I think I mentioned it. It's called Based on a True Story. It's like this couple. So there's like a serial killer in their neighborhood. They realize who it is. And then they decide, because she's really into true crime, that they're going to start a podcast where the serial killer is on the podcast with them.
But hang on. Is this not based on a book?
I don't know.
There's a book that I read.
But it started just getting, have you ever watched a show? I think of The Walking Dead, Grey's Anatomy, even like Days of Our Lives, like back in the day, where it just was like, okay, all these bad things keep happening.
Right.
Like this isn't, I mean, I know this is not real, But after a while where it's like, okay, where's the storyline going? You
Yes.
know, like right
Yeah.
immediately in the first season, the podcast gets taken down because they want to stand with the survivors or the victims. And it's like, well, no, I want to see this podcast kind of keep going. Maybe it does in the second season. I don't know. I did read it. I'm a read aheader. I'm a spoil alert girl. I want to
This
know
is
ahead of time.
like based off a book I read essentially. When did the book when did the book come out? So the book that I'm thinking of is called Listen for the Lie, and it's actually a really good book. But it's basically same story of this podcaster goes to this town of this girl who allegedly murdered her best friend, I think it was. And so it's this podcaster like on a true crime. He does true crime series. So this is his season. And so he's following her around, and then he is like trying to figure out who's lying and if she actually did it or not, and blah, blah, blah.
Gotcha.
It's a good book.
Interesting.
But that sounds like
another thing I did is I got a DEXA scan for the first time.
Oh yes. Talk about that. You were pissed.
So
pissed at you
the
or
time,
pissed at the DEXA?
I think I'm pissed at the
DEXA is the right answer.
Person creating the DEXA, even though I don't know if you can manipulate a DEXA scan. At the time, I had not eaten because it was literally when I was going through everything, like it was the Friday after Berkeley passed. And I just decided to get it done because I'm like, let's just get this done, get it over with because I already paid for it.
Right.
I weigh in at 149. Okay. I am pretty lean looking because I haven't eaten very much, not on purpose. For those who don't know, I had to put my dog down and I lost my appetite for, good reason. I have taken progress photos since then. It said I was 26.5% body fat. It said the fat on my trunk was higher than average. My visceral fat was higher than average. And my muscle was good, but there's I'm like, where? Tell me where. I get my ass, right? I'm not saying I'm I believe I'm probably around 20%, to be fair. So I was a little bit annoyed with it. I'm not in denial, you guys. I have a certain circumference of my waist versus my hips, and I don't have a lot of fat on my stomach, particularly because I have a very long torso. Unless it's all accumulating around my organs, and I just don't know that. I don't know. I just, being someone that's looked at bodies for 10 years.
Right.
I don't know. I was going to put it on the Mind Pump forum, but I was like, I don't want anyone to fucking.
You got a slew of opinions on that one.
I was going to send it to Adam directly, but this is not true. This cannot be true. You know? So it was, and maybe it is true, and I'm just in denial. But I mean, as someone who, again, has looked at many bodies and body fat percentages and all of that, I can't. I go, wait, so you're telling me I have visible abs and that I have too much fat around my trunk? He goes, yeah, sometimes athletes come in here and they're just their body fat's super high. And I'm like,
okay.
Now he knew I wasn't going to use any of his services.
Right. So then he's like, fuck you.
Yeah. And I'm like, okay, but maybe it's true. I kind of want to go to a different place and get another one, to see if it's true. Then I would be like, okay, apparently I've been walking around thinking I was way lower on body fat than I am. So that was a little bit disheartening. Yeah. I'm like, okay, I'm not. So then that means that in order for me to get back down in the teens, I'd have to kill myself.
Yeah.
Like not really, but it was like, this doesn't add up. It does not add up.
No. Something's not right. Something wrong.
Something's not right. Yeah. So that's something that I did. Let's move on to something that I think people really want to hear about, which is how to balance and navigate your alcohol intake. Now, we've talked about alcohol in our early episodes, but being that a lot of people are trying to go into dry January, or even just, as I've said, like continue to reduce anything that I find is having some sort of control over me in any way. Alcohol for me is not it's not, oh, I need that to relax. It's actually something that I do, and I've associated it with play, because when I was a kiddo, like I didn't have a lot of that. Like I was definitely a parentified child. My mom would probably disagree, but that's fine. And so it allows me to kind of like be silly and play and like have fun. And however, I've definitely even pulled back on like recognizing that and knowing that I've pulled back even more. And kind of weirdly, Harlem being alone in the house and being so concerned with her well-being has been even more beneficial for when we go out, because I'm constantly on the cameras seeing if she's asleep. And then when she wakes up, I'm like, okay, it's time to go. And we go home. So when she had her sister, we'd be like, oh, they're fine. So, but it's definitely something that I continue to find balance over. And there's a lot of influencers that I follow who look amazing and they don't drink. So that's been something that I've considered too, of just like not drinking at all. Which I could totally do.
It's pretty boring.
Yeah. So for us, we choose to drink moderately, and I think for a lot of our clients, we have clients who are sober, but we have clients who want to also drink moderately. We have clients who struggle with their alcohol consumption. So this is a good conversation. Have you had a drink yet?
Yes. When did I have a drink? I had a drink, I think Christmas Eve.
Wow.
Yes. I know. That was, and it was a white wine spritzer. So I know. But that's been it. Because it's kind of like, for me, I'm like, even if I were to have a drink, then I've got to like think of the pumping issue. And then like, do I have a drink far enough ahead where I can feed her, or do I have to dump that milk? And then right now, like to me, I'm like, milk is very precious. So and I have enough, and I have freezer milk too. So it's a silly thing to like be scarcity about, but it's also kind of like, I don't know. It's not to figure out the math of it is like, I'll just not drink. And I wasn't like a big drinker leading up to pregnancy anyways. Like I used to drink a lot, don't get me wrong. And I used to like have a glass of wine each night. But then after a while, like again, it was when I did Sober October really for the first time that I was like, oh fuck, like I actually feel better. And then like it wasn't as hard as, for me, it wasn't as hard as I thought it would be. And so I've did that every year since the first time I did it, I want to say is like 2019 or 2020. No, 2019, I want to say. And so once I started doing that, it started becoming easier and easier not to drink. And again, transparency. And I'm sure the people who have listened to this podcast have caught on. I tend to like other substances instead of alcohol. And so when I do drink a lot and I feel like shit, that's like reinforces why I don't drink that much.
Yeah. For me now, it's, how do I want to feel the next day?
Correct.
That's a big deal for me because obviously it's one of those things of I'm doing all these things to feel healthier, to feel better, to live a good life. And alcohol was becoming this thing that, I would feel sluggish or have, anxiety the next day. And it just wasn't it's not worth it.
Same. That's how I like the work, the not working out, the not like the eating, like, the anxiety that I would get because I already have anxiety. And I was like, well, I don't want more of that. And so, I'm with you.
Well, and the thing is like you said, it's boring when you're not consuming.
Yes.
Because it's so common. right? I know in our social group, that's something that we do. I just got invited to lunch at the Phoenix Country Club, and they're like, we'll have drinks, pickleball, and lunch. And I'm like, I'll just be there for lunch. Like, I have too much stuff to do today.
Yeah.
Also, for those of you listening, I will never drink an alcoholic drink and drive. Not a single drink. It's just
really?
something I don't do. No. It is I have the worst anxiety driving home.
Yeah.
Even when I drink, I went out with my girlfriends for a dinner and I had non-alcoholic beers. And I was scared.
Like, I promise it's sober.
Yeah, but it was just, and so I know for a lot of our clients, they are, busy professionals. They are a part of different like networking groups, clubs. Their jobs are very alcohol forward, where we're taking customers out, or they have very high stress jobs, so they can use alcohol for that. Again, we have a group of sober clients too, but it's, being someone, and I talked about this on the last episode, I want to be an example for the people I serve. So if we're teaching someone balance, then I want to also be balanced. And it's, there can be a balance. Now, we'll talk about how at the end of the day, alcohol is a toxin.
Yep.
It is a toxin. And I don't remember I heard it, but they're like, choose your toxin. I think it was Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, like, choose your toxin, because there's different things that you're going to be putting in your body. But you don't have to do any of it, right? So it's really about finding balance. Let's talk about like common questions and misconceptions that people have about alcohol, because this is definitely a conversation we have often.
Yeah. That's so what I think the biggest one, and especially I would say this is for our younger clients, is that they'll not eat. Not, you don't think so?
No. Well, not my client load.
Okay. Well, so y'all won't eat in order to save your calories for alcohol. I see that one a lot.
Yeah. Kind of like, and I'm guilty of this. Like, I choose lighter drinks, right? But what I've found is I will have a lot of those lighter drinks.
Yeah. Because they tend to be like crispier and like tastier.
Easier to drink.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, okay, I'm having a lot of lighter drinks instead of like one, maybe like, not that I drink like a Manhattan or something, but like some of our clients just drink like martinis. Yeah. Right. And they're like, yeah, I have one and I'm good. And I'm like, I should probably do that. This is the big one, thinking that alcohol calories do not count.
Right.
They count. I guarantee you, we pull back on your alcohol, you're going to see amazing changes. I know if when I was my leanest, I didn't drink for like 2 months, and it was crazy how my body responded. It was also crazy how Mark and I were like, what do you do? You're not drinking alcohol. So we like went to the botanical gardens and we went to zoo lights and like did all this stuff. It's funny.
That you'll burn off the calories from alcohol through exercise.
Yeah. Talk about that.
Well, as we know, and from prior episodes, we've talked about like exercise doesn't elicit fat loss, and exercise, the calories that you burn are energy, essentially, like nuggets, we'll call them. And it doesn't specifically go like, oh, she's working out today. Like, we'll make sure we send the alcohol calories to her. And
well, they're empty calories, so there's no energy.
There's no energy to take from them. So it doesn't like create a negative, or it doesn't create like an equal balance of like, I burned and therefore it didn't actually happen.
Right. So what do we mean by that? Like, alcohol is empty calories. There's no macro micronutrients that our body can use, right? Energy comes from our food. And so it's still, though, calories coming in from ethanol, right? And it's just a different, again, it's a toxin. It's a different type of calorie coming in, even though a calorie is technically energy. They're just empty calories. Yeah. And so you're trying to burn off something that's not necessarily burn offable, right? If you will. Yep. And I used to do that all the time, where I'd be on vacation with friends and I would work out the next day thinking like, now there's nothing wrong with that. I was just trying to find balance. But you definitely can't sweat it out. That's another thing. I'm gonna sweat out the alcohol.
Or you work out like to add extra calories from your workout, so that way you can add the calories from the alcohol back in too. I've had that.
And clients listening, like I'll tell clients when they have like a party or something, I'm like, let's get more movement in that day.
Yeah.
Right. Let's get more movement in that day. Let's, be protein forward. I do have them kind of move and shift around mainly because I want them to get their protein intake in.
Right.
Because, once those alcohol drinks come in, the nachos come in, the things come in, and now we're just, off the rails.
Yeah.
So the other thing is that alcohol misconception is like a stress reliever or helps you sleep.
Mm-hmm.
I have had clients be like, it's just one of those days I need a glass of wine. And I'm like, okay, but let's look at this from a body's perspective and a nervous system perspective. Like you need to dysregulate yourself right now in a natural way. Having, drinking is going to stunt that process. And then you go to sleep. Once the alcohol leaves your system, you will have this kind of blood sugar crash. So you wake up. Now we're anxious because we just stunted the feeling of whatever we're going through, went to sleep, had the crash, wake up, super anxious, can't go back to sleep, right? It's this false sense of stress relief. It's a false sense of relaxation, and that's really important for people to understand, which we'll talk about a little in more detail.
Right. I would say lastly that we have listed here is the confidence boost they get from it. And this is more so because of how it interacts with your brain. And so it shuts down the frontal lobe, right? I think, it shuts down the frontal lobe of like what is appropriate and what is not appropriate for certain situations and topics and conversations and whatnot. So when it shuts that down, of course, you're going to have more confidence to do things because there's not like a regulation system that's happening. Yeah. And so it's not actually, you're not actually getting a confidence boost, because I would actually more so say that you probably have the contrary, because the next day you wake up thinking, what did I do? And you become more self-conscious. Now, this is for the person that like maybe overdrank or blacked out or something like that. Yeah. But there's always, and that was one thing I didn't like when I was drinking a bit, is I would always second guess what I did and say around people, whether it was like one drink or 5 drinks or I was drunk. And to me, I was like, well, that's kind of stupid to feel that way, because why do I care? And it's like, I care because now my frontal lobe is turned back on at the moment. And so you're rehashing everything. Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely inhibits your decision-making and your boundaries. I know for me, I would make up these stories. So once I had like a couple of drinks in, then this kind of, I wouldn't call it my inner critic. It's Xtina. She comes in and she's like, but you're making memories with your friends. Like, keep going. This is fun. Like, da-da-da. Now I've trained my brain to be like, okay, that's it. Like, we're good. You're good. Now, I still struggle with that, guys. This is probably one of my biggest struggles, because it's just been, I was a bartender for 10 years. My social group, and not a lot of us have children. So we have the freedom to kind of do where the fuck we want.
Right.
Alcohol has been at the forefront of a lot of what we do, but it's kind of cool when I go to an event and I don't drink, and I'm so fucking proud of myself. I'm like, like football Sunday with everyone there. Everyone's drinking. We've got margaritas. We got this, and I'm just chilling with my soda water. It's very good. All right. Alcohol obviously plays a part on your physical health. So we're going to talk about short-term versus long-term effects. So obviously short-term, you can become dehydrated, right? That's funny when our clients weigh themselves the day after they drink and they're like, oh, my weight didn't go up. And then the next day it's like,
yep.
Because their body's like so dehydrated. It again affects your sleep. I know for me, if I go overboard, and Mark too, it's kind of funny because we'll both wake up around the same time and then we're just up.
Yep.
And I'm like on the TV, and then we'll start watching something, and then 3 hours later, we're still up. It's the worst. And it obviously doesn't help with recovery, right? Because again, our body needs energy at rest, needs rest and energy at rest to recover from our workouts and recover from the day's stress. Again, talking about how it is a false sense of a stress reliever. So we're not actually even recovering emotionally,
Right.
right? It kind of just numbs, right? We just kind of numb out. And then once that we thaw out of that numbing, if you will, or that freezing, everything kind of comes to us twice as hard than before we drank. So there's that. What would you add to that?
I would actually, and this isn't in our notes, but thinking of like the emotional impact of that. So say like you're trying to numb out and you drink. Well, now if you feel like crap the next day, you don't have the additional energy, like emotionally or mentally, to deal with whatever you're trying to disassociate from.
Right.
Either,
Absolutely.
right. So it's kind of creating that perpetual cycle of, okay, well, it's still a problem, but now you really don't even have the bucket filled to deal with that problem.
Yeah.
And so you're just recreating it.
I remember going through a bad breakup and I was determined. I was like, I am not drinking. I need to feel this. I want to get past this. With Brooklyn, we did have a brunch I talked about with friends. Everyone's drinking champagne and these like fancy cocktails. And I'm like, no, just give me a Coors Light.
Really?
Maple and ash. Yeah. And then I had my soda water next to me. I ended up coming home and getting emotional, because obviously it makes you more emotional and it decreases your emotional boundaries. That's why people cry. That's why people get angry. That's why stuff comes up that you've been holding in. That's been something that I've struggled with. And, you just, while it's fun and all of those things, I don't know why I got served this on Instagram. Our daddy goes, no one's woken up after an alcoholic experience and been like, that was the best version of me ever yesterday.
Correct.
So those are some of the short-term effects. We didn't cover this, but it impacts your REM sleep. So my Aura ring is always like, your sleep was shit. Your REM sleep was, 20 minutes. Your deep sleep was 30 when it should be an hour and a half to 2 hours. Anytime I drink, my heart rate goes up when I sleep.
Yep.
I hate that feeling.
Well,
I hate
hot
it.
And cold, hot and cold too. Yeah.
So, those are the short-term effects. Long-term wise, obviously with chronic consumption.
Yeah.
And I hate to say this to myself, but chronic consumption doesn't mean we have to be drinking every single day. It could be drinking a lot in one day.
Yeah. I know. Actually, so one podcast episode I want to, and I will have that linked in the show notes, is from Andrew Huberman. He did a whole podcast on alcohol. Have you ever listened to it? It's really good.
Yeah.
And so he talks about like, okay, what is like alcohol, like chronic alcohol use? And he's like, it's not just like, it's not, it can be every day, 1 drink a day, or it could be a full, like essentially a binge day too. Like those are equivalent to what it does to your body. I'm like, oh, not good.
Yeah. No. And I'm definitely guilty of the latter, where I wouldn't drink all week and then we go out. And I unfortunately have a very high tolerance for alcohol. It's not funny. It sucks.
Yeah.
Like, and so I don't necessarily feel the effects. So I'll drink, and I drink fast. I drink everything fast.
Yeah.
So coffee, anything. So I run into my reality of like,
oh fuck, I'm drunk.
And I could binge drink without even feeling the effects of it. That's not good. It's not good. And I'm sharing this with you guys because I mean, obviously, as we've said before, like this is our reality. This is my reality and something I've struggled with since I was 20 years old.
Right.
And I have made huge strides and improvements in this. But as I talked about on that last episode, there is still much more work to do. And I'm so excited to talk about some of the things that I've realized that are going to be game changers this year. I'm so excited. Other things, though, is for women in, post-menopause, they'll realize, number one, they can't drink as much. They will have like higher effects from alcohol, worse hangovers, but also it will mess with your hormonal health.
Yeah.
It impacts your muscle development. It increases fat storage, which is already going to naturally increase, and it affects your energy levels. So if we think about perimenopause, we have an increase in visceral fat, right? We are losing muscle if we're not focusing on protein and strength training. Then on top of that, it's harder to develop that muscle if we're drinking. We're fatigued, we're not sleeping well, and then we add alcohol on top of that. And we're just wondering why we feel like shit.
Right.
And that's the biggest thing for me is like, I don't want to feel like shit. There's been bouts of like fatigue after traveling where like days and days later, I'm just dead. And I know why, because we were on vacation and we did the drinks or we did the whatever. And it's just, it's not worth it. Like with the vacation, I'm thinking of like Dustin's birthday when we're all together. It was really fun. It was really fun. But the beautiful thing about that is, I was able to leave when I needed to leave. I didn't have to stick around and hang out with everyone. So, but hormonal health is so important. And as we talked about, like your specific hormones that it affects, cortisol is one of the biggest ones. Like we talked about the anxiety the next day, the fluttering of your heart, right? And so the like elevated cortisol levels that we're having because we're not addressing our emotional needs is going to, as we talked about in previous episodes, increase fat stores specifically around your belly.
Yeah.
And cortisol, so cortisol is kind of the director, right? Or not director, I shouldn't say that. But cortisol impacts the majority of your hormones. So the higher cortisol you have, the more that the other hormones we're going to talk about are affected too. And so being able, the way I think about it is if we can have a practice of regulating our bodies, getting to a, parasympathetic place, and then if we want to have a drink or two with dinner, we can, but we don't want to do it the opposite because the cortisol levels will just shoot up.
Right. And so then the other hormones that it's going to impact is your testosterone. It's going to decrease levels, which again, women don't have these exponentially high testosterone levels compared to men, but we don't want them going lower. Estrogen, like you talked about, it's going to increase levels there, which also contributes to the belly fat storage. Growth hormone, so it's going to impact that one. It's going to suppress it, and which slows your recovery. So again, if we're strength training, working on our body and our nutrition, I would say alcohol almost like cancels out most of that positive steps towards your health, right? And it doesn't mean like it totally eliminates everything that you've been doing, but if we're drinking every night or having like a full binge day essentially every weekend, then what you've just done, it's like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back essentially. Insulin, it's going to change that. So interrupts the insulin production and liver function, which can increase the chance of hypoglycemia. So decrease in the sugar. Impacts your thyroid. So thyroid has impact on mood and energy. And hormone health. Reproductive hormones. So like Christina was talking about, and essentially reproductive hormones, including the estrogen, testosterone. But for those who are not in the postmenopause stage, is for us that are in like the prenatal, pregnancy, postpartum stage, it can interrupt your menstrual cycle as well. So that's one thing too, for like my girls who are trying to get pregnant. One of the things I'm like, just take out the alcohol. Like when I'm like, oh, I have a glass of wine every night, which yes, that's okay. Why are we using it to wind down? Do we truly like it? Is it something that you do with your significant other? Like what's the reason? But realize that that can have an impact too, on your menstrual cycle and also your sleep too. And the cortisol, like we're talking about. So if it's stressing your body and you're not aware of it, well, the body doesn't like to make a baby in a stressful state.
Right.
So, and go ahead.
Well, and like, we also have to realize too, like, when you're hungover or feeling sluggish the next day and we want all the food, like it is affecting the hormones that regulate your hunger and fullness cues.
Right.
It's going to increase your ghrelin, which says I'm hungry, and it's going to decrease your leptin, which says I'm satisfied. And that's why it's this kind of, hangover effect, this aftermath of not only am I drinking and it's affecting all of my hormones, right?
Yeah.
But then those hormones that it's affecting then create these behaviors, right? I'm eating more, I'm not feeling as satisfied. And the hormone, it's just this kind of snowball effect, right? That just going and going and going. And again, I'm someone who has struggled with this, so I get it. Another thing too, I mean, alcohol has a great impact on our likelihood to have certain types of cancers. Breast cancer is one of them that I've read of lately that, and that scares me because of the damage that I've done to my body because of alcohol. It's that, I'm at greater risk of breast cancer because I've put this toxin in my body. The other thing is obviously liver disease, right? And, for me, I do have precautions that I put in place to help with my liver functioning, to help with the absorption if I am choosing to drink. Things like Z-biotics, but I actually don't take Z-biotics. I take DHM, which I've talked about on here before. It's actually helps with absorption of alcohol. But, again, I'm still, am I preventing, liver, these changes to my liver? I don't know. I'm trying, but not drinking would obviously help that. And then bone health. Again, if we're affecting our muscle mass, if we're affecting our ability to recover, that obviously is going to affect our bone health because the more muscle we have in our body, the stronger our bones are. And, for a lot of people, especially if we're doing the thing where we're not eating and then we're drinking our calories, we're not getting in the macros, micronutrients, that is going to affect the structure of your body. So, cancer, disease, osteoporosis, these are things that, chronic consumption, as we talked about, can affect women specifically. So it's not just, I'm enjoying my life, YOLO. It's like, well, yeah, YOLO. You only live once, which Amanda and I don't believe, but it's fine. We believe in multiple lives.
I know. Well, and that's to say, like, you can YOLO, but then you have to kind of come to Jesus on that one and say, like, what are my goals? And is this impacting my goals too? Because this is one of the easiest levers to pull. So like we've talked about, it's going to impact hormones, which impact your recovery. It's going to impact your muscle development. It's going to interfere with your fat metabolism and weight management. So meaning if you do not like your belly and you are drinking Coors Lights every night, then that's probably a contributor to the belly fat and the abdominal storage that you're having. So it's one of those things of like, people really have a hard time thinking that alcohol contributes and then giving it up. And they almost want to say like, okay, I'll do everything but this part. And this may be the one key. And even not the one key, but like, so if we've got everything dialed in, this may be the one key. But if we don't have anything dialed in, this may be the one key in the sense of this is the easiest lever to adjust, right? If you don't want to work on your nutrition, if you don't want to like go to the gym a little bit more consistently, then just decreasing the alcohol consumption can help. And then as we were saying, like the next day, if you're going to go to the gym, it's going to impact how you perform, your coordination, how well you can like endure the workout as well. I know for me, like I would go the next day and it was like, oh God, like I could not push through a workout as well as I do when I was sober the night before.
No, agreed. I mean, your recovery state is shit. And then you're trying to compensate for what you put in your body that ultimately affected your recovery. And then you're trying to pull from this, empty cup, if you will. And that's not how it works. You'd be better off resting, feeding your body, hydrating, right? And just getting back to homeostasis.
Right.
Good. From a nutrition aspect, we've already kind of touched on this. Like alcohol is empty calories. There's no vitamins, minerals. These are things that we need, especially in peri and postmenopause. These are things, there are specific vitamins that we need to consume to help to reduce the effects of going through hormonal changes in our lives. We'll talk about that on another episode specifically. And then the regulation of your ghrelin and your leptin, right? That is why I remember back in the day, and now this has shifted, but I remember being, and it's because I was drinking a lot more, like I just don't get full when I'm drinking at all.
Yeah.
And I'm eating all the things. I just don't get full. And I'm like, this is so great. No, it's not. I can eat all these foods. And then I, of course, without the, frontal lobe, guiding the way, we're also going to be like, well, I can have that. It's fine. It's like this little voice in your head is like a PR, like public relations person who's like, no, we're going to spin this story to make this okay.
Yes. Well, and even thinking of like essentially like I can eat the trash can and be fine. Your body processes alcohol first because like you said, it's a toxin. So it's not, even if you were to have like the salad with the chicken breast dressing on the side and blah, 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 it's not like it goes like, oh, thank God, I'm going to take nutrients from this. It's going to go, okay, I've got to process this alcohol out of me first as quickly as I can because of the impact it has on the body. And so it's interesting because most of the time, like you could say, okay, I ate less, so therefore I stayed within my calories or my maintenance. But essentially, if I'm not taking in account of the alcohol, I'm in a surplus with no benefit from those extra calories, right? So when we're in a surplus, hopefully the benefit is for muscle recovery and rebuilding if we're in a bulk. And so now my body has to process this, and then I'm in a surplus with all of, I think this is not actually how it works, but just to put it in like a picture for y'all, is that now I've got all this food that I've been consuming that's just staying in me. It's not processing out, and my body's not taking from it what it needs because it's so busy focusing on the alcohol.
Right. No, I agree. It's, again, if there's a toxin in your body's job is to get that out first. And so you can have more of these fat stores because when you do consume the carbs and the fats, as you're saying, they're not processing through and ultimately can be stored as, fat. And that's not what we want. Right. And again, the choices we make when we're over consuming when it comes to nutrition. Now, I've actually been really good about this in my older years where I actually I don't know what happened. It's obviously because I've been more mindful with my drinking, but I tend to, focus on foods that are going to serve my body, making sure I'm getting protein in. I don't eat as much when, I have more boundaries and that's what we ultimately, and balance, right? We ultimately want to receive that. Now, I'm saying that knowing exactly what we just said. Like I'm still making healthy choices. Like when we were on vacation, my breakfast was like a bagel and lox, and I got a side of egg whites. Then for lunch, I had shrimp cocktail, but then we had some drinks at lunch, right? So like I know my body is, even though I'm putting these delicious foods in my body and these whole foods in my body, the alcohol is still going to be processed first. But again, I'm trying to find that balance.
Right. And so like you said, I think it's, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. It's choosing the toxin, if you will.
Yeah. And that's what, like you said, just making sure with the balance of I'm having protein at every meal. I'm making sure to eat instead of not. When I do eat, I'm making probably more health conscious choices. Like for example, I usually tell clients when they go out to eat, like if you're going to go out to eat, if you're usually have appetizer, dinner, dessert, and alcohol, maybe we choose between the appetizer, dessert, and alcohol and choose one or two out of the three.
Choose your indulgence.
Yes. Well, also to make sure then the other thing too, say you do consume, is the next day that we're going back to our bare minimums of nutrition. We're not going, oh, fuck, like I already had the alcohol, like let's go for brunch and just kind of splurge on whatever. Right. And so these behaviors that we talk about here still apply to even with alcohol. And I want to emphasize, like, we're not like anti-alcohol. And as you talked about, like you drink, I just tend not to because it's not my preferred vice. But I come from a place where I did drink and I did have drinks every night, or I would go out on the weekend. So there's definitely a balance of like, you can have alcohol, but we also need to be realistic about what it's doing. And if you're okay with it, fine. And if you're okay with the outcome body wise, fine. But if you're not, then like I said, easiest trigger to pull. Or we need to be more conscious of the nutrition choices we make to help, like you said, balance it out. So if, for example, if you guys weren't drinking, maybe you wouldn't have had the egg whites with the bagel lox because, you know, like, oh, I'll have a heartier protein lunch at some point later on. Whereas if I'm drinking, I'm probably not going to really want the protein, but I'll have something lighter.
Well, let's talk about, you know, we're having people over tomorrow, right? Yeah. So my goal tomorrow is to tomorrow is actually my like active recovery day, but it does include like some sprints and some mobility. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to I always make this kind of like crazy protein packed bowl when I know that I'm going to have more, like if I'm going to have drinks that day. So it will be either like 8 ounces of Greek yogurt with a scoop of protein powder, some berries, eat that, and then maybe even add a shake to that. I mean, that's going to be like 70 grams of protein. Now I might get a little bloated from that because it's a lot of protein. And I'm going to eat that, you know, so I'm going to set myself up, especially because I know the spread that we are having. But even like, you know, the spread itself, we follow the rules that we have. I always follow the rules that we set for our clients. So like the AAA, like I'm going to eat what I love. I'm not going to graze. I'm not going to sit there and just like grab food just because, but I do set myself up for success. The other things I like to do is like drink an element tea, make sure I have like 2 things of water and that I am, you know, which we'll talk about some steps to help balance using those steps to, you know, overall, again, like you said, we are drinking, I drink, but I, you know, in my age, like as I age, as I get older, like just realizing like it really does have such an impact on you, your mental health. It can increase anxiety. It can increase depression. It can, again, feel like this false sense of stress relief. So then our bodies are just kind of, you're not naturally going through emotion, right? It's the same as, I mean, you're dissociating.
Yeah. Well, like I could say from my experience, what resonates more with me is exercise. Like I wasn't going through the emotion, but I was going through exercise, which I thought would make me get to the end of that emotion. Alcohol does the same thing.
Yeah. So let's talk about navigating social situations. So again, we want to, first and foremost, I think one of the questions I like to ask my clients is, do we have to drink in this situation?
Yeah.
Like you never have to drink in a situation, but is it like, oh no, this is like
what we do,
our country club's cocktail holiday deal. Okay. We might have some drinks there, but if it's book club, you don't have to fucking drink. And you guys know who I'm talking about. There's 2 of them in our program. Like you don't have to drink at fucking book club. It's on a Tuesday night.
Ooh.
Yes. We don't have to drink at book club. I don't care if we're having a special cocktail. Like ask for the fucking recipe. You know these people. Yeah. So is it a situation I want to be drinking in? So like I talked about, I went out with my girlfriends. It was a weekday. I have a hard rule unless I'm on vacation or obviously it's a holiday tomorrow.
It's like, we're going to spin this one.
So, a special event, which even then, like my girlfriend came into town. I hadn't seen her in a while and I had non-alcoholic beers, right? Everyone else had drinks. I was the only one not drinking. Or we went over to our friend Sarah's house. Everyone was drinking. I chose to just drink my soda water and everything was fine, right? Whereas tomorrow I'm choosing to drink on a weekday because we're having this brunch. It's our ASU game and I'm going to be at home.
Yeah.
I think that's a big thing for me is like, I can put my ass to bed, take a little nappy, drink my water, maybe, whatever I want to do, go in the cold plunge, replenish. That's one of my favorite things to do after drinking. Let's go to the cold plunge. It like shocks my system.
Ooh.
I know. So thinking about what the events are, and then, okay, well, this is a big one for my clients. And maybe I feel like you would associate with this more. Well, maybe not. So one of my clients is like, but everyone just drinks. And like, would it be weird if I'm the one not drinking? She has done it where she doesn't drink. She just has soda water now. She's like, literally no one cares.
Yeah.
Literally
well, no one notices. Once you get over like your own, what's it called? Like insecurity. There we go. Once you get over your own insecurity of doing that, it's totally fine. Because then what I kind of realize is when people do that to me of like, oh, you're not drinking. Oh, you're not drinking. Why don't you have a drink? It's more so if they kind of are like, well, what are you going, like, they don't know what to do with themselves if they were to not drink at the party.
Oh yeah.
It's their own. Yeah. And so I'm like, this is not my problem to solve for you, that you feel odd if I don't drink, or that you would feel odd if roles were reversed. And so for me, it always goes back to like the why of, and I would tell a client this too, of if she's like, man, I really don't I don't want to drink, but people always pressure me. It's like, well, what's your why? Why don't you want to drink? Well, I don't want to feel like shit tomorrow because I have to go to work. Okay, well, that's a pretty big reason. Or like, I know I have to take care of my kid that wakes up at like 2 a.m. Okay, well, that's a pretty good reason too, to not feel like shit. Yeah. So that's what I would, just emphasize, or just say, oh, I'm going to grab one later.
Yeah. Or just say, yeah, I have a busy day tomorrow and I want to feel terrible. And if someone has a problem with that, then they're probably not a good friend to you.
Well, that's a problem.
Yeah. So, that pressure can feel, and I'm going to tell you guys something very vulnerable. I got into this mindset of when it came to like changes to my diet, right? I was always, how do I do this around alcohol?
Oh.
Yeah. And I found that to be an issue. Like I talked about, like anything that's pulling me in a certain direction of, how am I going to navigate this and allow for alcohol? Now, again, we are talking about creating balance, but it was almost like it dictated everything that I did.
Right.
When it comes to whatever changes I was making to my diet. So I found that to be a little bit too like controlling to me of that. That was my first thought of like, okay, well, how do I do this and still, drink with everyone? Because everyone drinks and I don't want to be weird or, boring or whatever that is when I'm not. I literally am the same human.
Correct.
But I remember everything.
Yeah. I remember my cousin, she came out and it was during Sober October, of course. And I was like, and she was drinking and hanging out. And then the next day we're kind of talking. She's like, you're literally the same person with and without alcohol. And I was like, okay, well, that's good. Cause I don't think so. And so it's not worth it for me to like feel like a different person, but everybody perceives I'm the same.
I listened to myself on this podcast and I'm like, no, that's literally who I am. Like this doesn't change, I laugh a lot more, I might
sillier.
I don't know, yeah, sillier. But that's that play part.
Right.
Like I'm more kid-like. And like maybe I don't need to be a kid. Yeah. Or I can do other things like adult coloring books. Now, I'm about to blow your minds if you are a beer drinker. Now, not a lot of you are. So we all know I love me, my beer. I have found the Athletic Brewing Company that is non-alcoholic beers. They taste exactly like a light beer, which makes me so happy. And they're only the light one is 25 calories. The other one that I had was 45 calories. But they have an IPA version. They have a hazy IPA. They have a golden, I believe it was this one that I had, the golden. And And they have an all out, which is extra dark. And then they have like a Hefeweizen. And I'm telling you guys, my brain was like, oh, we're having a drink. It was the coolest feeling. And I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This is awesome because and no one knew I was drinking a non-alcoholic beer at the table.
No, they don't care.
It came in a can. He put it in a glass.
Looks like it. Yeah.
Oh, it's fucking awesome. Yeah. Athletic Brewing Company. I would like you to sponsor this podcast.
Please.
Was it the light? I feel like the one I got it wasn't white. The can was blue. Huh.
Oh, well.
Yeah, but it wasn't the all out. Of course, I wouldn't drink that. But it was 45 calories.
Sparkling waters are.
Yeah, they have Moscow Mule, Palomas.
Yeah.
What's this? Round of Cheers. I don't know what that is. Brute IPA. This is Belgian style white. You should get Michael. He doesn't like beer.
No, he doesn't. I got him a whiskey touring book thing from Costco, so he's fine for the next year.
Oh, okay. Because he wants to tour whiskey?
I don't fucking know. I just saw it and I was like, I'll get him that for a push gift.
I love it. Oh, they have a Mexican style beer. Holy cow, man. I love it. I love it, love it, love it. And for me, they do have this at a lot of places. Mm-hmm. I can do like a Coors Light and then have one of these.
Yeah.
And I'm good to go.
Yeah.
Or I can just drink these. It's awesome. And there's so many awesome companies out there. This is just one that I have personal experience with. Uh-huh. And it makes me happy because everything we talked about, obviously you are holding onto a drink. It smells like alcohol. You feel like you're doing it. No one's going to question you, even if, not that they need to. And you're going to feel great in the morning. We're not going to have this hangover and you're going to be feeling good. So I personally love Athletic Brewing, but again, I am a beer drinker. Tell them about your options.
I just do the tequila. So a lot of people actually do like a club soda with an alcohol. So I would say just do the club soda with the mixer that you like without the alcohol. And again, going back to like the moderation, abstaining, and balance of all this is you can do. So for me, I do silver tequila, club soda, lime. I can do that. And then the next time I have a drink, it's going to be club soda and lime. Mm-hmm. Or what you do too is you have the tequila, soda, lime, but then you get another tequila or soda and lime, and then you add to it too. Yeah. If I'm at home,
just to repeat that. So okay. I keep probably like a third of the tequila soda in the glass. Mm-hmm. I ask for a side of soda water and I pour that into the glass and replenish the glass with just soda water.
Yeah. And then like if I'm at home too, what I'll do, which sounds probably a little above and beyond what some people can do, but it is an option, is I'll put the tequila in a shot glass and only do it like in halves. So every drink is just half of that shot. Excuse me.
Oh, that's fine.
Well, because you're at home, like I don't need to be drunk within 4 hours. Like I can make this last a little bit longer and enjoy it as we go. I also like if I'm going to go out, have mimosa, I'll end up just probably having just the champagne or like a dash of the juice that I add in. And then I'm switching to water or something. And I tell clients, when they go out, like if you're going to drink, but track ahead. And so say like, for example, I'm going to go out and have 5 drinks is my expectation tomorrow. And I'll say, well, add 7. That way you have like a leeway. And plus when you calculate, like you don't know if the bartender is making like an actual shot or a shot and a half, or maybe 2 because you like them and you're being friendly, like you don't actually know how much content is going in there. And then for every drink you have, you switch with water or like a club soda, because I promise you, once you're drunk, like you're just going to keep getting more drunk. Correct. And it's very hard to U-turn that once you're already drunk. But if you can kind of plan ahead and climb that mountain as one step in front of the other, instead of trying to get to the top as quickly as you can, you're going to enjoy that day a lot better rather than like blacking out and being like, what the fuck happened?
Right.
That's maybe speaking more to my college self, but even today I still see it with some people where I'm like, dude, like just you're going to get drunk. Like it's totally fine, but we have like 4
Yeah.
more hours. So we don't need to be drunk on hour 1 when we've got the rest of the day.
Right. Well, and now what I'm about to say is going to be hypocritical because I've talked about like not wanting to be drawn to anything that's like controlling me. But one thing I've done too is, and it gives you that same kind of feeling is there are THC seltzers and like you can't drink a whole one. Like you'll be fucked up. So I've used those instead. And the cool thing about that, you have to moderate it because you drink that shit too fast.
You're done.
You're like, "Wah!"
Well, then you have to leave the party.
Right. I brought one to our friend's dad's restaurant. I was like, I'm bringing my own drink. And I filled up a big cup of soda water and then put a third of it of the seltzer can's very small into the cup. And then by the time I was 2 in, not even 1 can, I mean 2 of those drinks in, I was feeling so good. I was like, this is great. I'm having a great time. I'm laughing. Like I'm more relaxed. Now, again, this is something I'm using to feel a bit more relaxed.
Right.
But I didn't feel like shit the next day. I slept great. Like all the things. And I'm not inhaling that or, snorting it up my nose, whatever people do with drugs. I drink it. And THC has a lot of benefits to it.
Yes.
So, as we know. So, that's just something I've used. And again, just deciding too. So, a lot of our clients, like, I don't understand why, like, I, like, don't look a certain way. When I looked I was my leanest. I wasn't my healthiest. I completely stopped drinking.
Oh, yeah.
I stopped drinking. I was zoned in. I would bring my own food to places. I was constantly like, I was obsessed with what I was doing. And people think, oh, well, I will say this too. People look at someone like you and I, or other people in the industry who do drink moderately. They're like, well, why can you do it? And you seem to be fine. And I can't. I also had to build a physique, a very muscular physique.
Yeah.
That allows to kind of veer off track here and there. Whereas if you're trying to build that physique and you're constantly veering off track, you're going to have a lot harder time.
Right. I would say too, and my rebuttal to that comment is I decided that how I felt in my workout the next morning was a lot more important than the drinking.
Yeah.
Too.
Yeah.
So and it's not to say that I don't have a drink or that I wouldn't, but it's more so of like, I like to sleep and I like to sleep well and I like to work out. And that's more fun to me. Like I'm enjoying being here and socializing, but to me, that's more consistent fun.
I agree. I want to share, I was just thinking about it in my head, my timeline for like how I've come to the place I'm at now.
Okay.
So when I was in my like mid to late 20s, everything was surrounding alcohol. We would get off work, go have drinks, do happy hour, weekends, football, everything was alcohol. Then in my like mid 30s, I began to pull back on weekday drinking solely because I had gone through my own. That's when the breakup happened. Right before the breakup, I was probably the worst I've ever been when I came to drinking. Because I had all my stuff had kind of come to head. Once the breakup happened, I pulled back. I decided I wasn't going to drink through the breakup, which gave me a realization that, wow, like you said, I feel better when I'm not drinking. I really began about 2 years prior to that is when I entered the fitness industry, like in 2010, maybe 30 or whatever, it doesn't matter. And so I started focusing on my training, my eating, and slowly started to titrate down. Now I was dating right after that. So you go on dates, but also, yeah, you have a drink. I didn't want to go on a date and like get drunk, of course. I used to do that back in the day. Oh yeah. 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 It's great.
I mean, I used to,
but that meant there would be days during the week where I'd have some drinks. Right. So then I started, then Mark and I met, and for us, it was, he didn't like to drink on the weekdays as much. Now he and I would go on dates and we'd have a drink or two, but then that turned into not drinking at all on the weekdays. And then, not going to lie, we'd kind of save it for the weekends and we'd have a lot of fun. Like we've had a lot of fun together, and alcohol has been involved in that. So now he has learned that he's actually has a sensitivity to barley and wheat. So he only has cocktails. I just, as I've kind of come forward, I've realized even on vacation, sometimes I'm like, I'm getting too drunk. Like I need to step out. And it's actually caused rifts with my friends.
Oh,
One
really?
friend particularly, it was like, I'm not going to do that. And I was like, why would you say that to me? Like we got in this whole argument. We later talked about it. But like, I'm like, no, I'm feeling too tipsy right now. And you guys want to drink for the rest of the day. I'm going to go take a nap. So I started like setting some of those boundaries. Right. Then now it's like, oh, now I have these, I actually can go to a party and not drink, or like a get together and not drink. And I have these options now. And it makes me very happy. It almost is freeing for me. Now, again, I will still have those days. Tomorrow is going to be a day that, I don't know, I'm going to actually get the athletic and do the swaps between Coors Light and the athletic drink. But it didn't just happen overnight for me. It's been a decade.
It took time.
Yeah. And doing it in a way, and I will say it could have been a lot sooner if I would have not worried about what everyone else thought.
Yeah. That's the hardest part. Well, so for me, it was, in college, I drank a lot. Like I honestly would black out a lot, and I didn't think of it as an issue, but I mean, it's obviously an issue when you black out a lot. And it didn't matter, but I think that was more so of, I didn't understand like the regulation of alcohol at that age. So again, some forgiveness for that, but also some like, okay, personal responsibility of like, you probably didn't need to be drinking as much as you were. But that's where I tell clients, like, you have to remember you're going to get drunk. And I didn't know that. Like, it was like, oh, I drink the drink. How come I'm not drunk at this drink? Instead of realizing that it kind of comes on, as opposed to like, that's the difference between alcohol and like smoking pot, is that like you smoke and you're like, oh fuck, I'm stoned, right? With alcohol, you're like, I'm okay. And then you're like, oh fuck, I'm like drunk.
Now I'm fucked up.
Yes. So I had to learn that too. And so then grad school, I would usually have probably a glass of wine, maybe 3 to 4 nights a week. And I didn't really think anything of it, but it was just something I did. And then of course, drinking on weekends and whatnot. Then adult life, I dialed back just because, like, again, going to work the next day, I didn't want to be hungover. And then when I did Sober October, again, that was just like a challenge for myself of doing it. And so I did it. And that's when I kind of realized like, oh, like I can do this. And that's where I picked up the strategies that I use today. And then with my clients of like just ordering a club soda with lime and people think it's a drink, right? Or just saying like, oh, I'm going to get one in here in a bit. Oh no, I just had one, like kind of lying. And it's not like a lie of being intentional, but it's just like, just get the fuck off my back, because people would get on me. And so then I became insecure of like, am I not fun anymore? And I did have, similar to you, friends make comments sometimes. And that was almost like hurtful, because it was like, am I not this, like, are you friends with me because we have fun when we're drinking and that's about it? Like, and if that's the case, then fuck, like, do I need a drink to be fun? Because that's another thing that I feel insecure about, because I'm, my structure and rigid and whatnot. Like if I don't drink, I'm not fun. And so I had to get over that too, of that insecurity. And so again, that like took years, and I would drink and do Sober October, and then realize like that would almost be like my reminder of like, oh yeah, like this is okay. And so then the next year, just by default, I ended up drinking a little bit less. And then sober October again, okay, would drink a little bit less. And then that's where I got to the point of like, oh, I don't really like doing this because I don't like second guessing how I behaved and looked or behaved and said, even though I know it was probably fine. And then I just don't like the anxiety of that day. And then I also like the workout and that whole structure that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And then of course it was like, I was going to get pregnant. So I was like, well, I don't want to be drinking and then trying to get pregnant as well. Chances are, like, again, people have McDonald's and drink every day and get pregnant. So you're fine. But for me, it was like, if there's certain things that I like, it wasn't so important to me anymore to continue drinking for when I was like, well, I'm just going to get pregnant anyway. So therefore it made pregnancy, like not drinking through that, not that big of a deal. Whereas I've had some clients and some friends be really challenged by that because then they're like, well, fuck, now what do I do? And it's like, well, that's something we should think about more so rather than trying like, how do I get through this without alcohol? Of like, what did alcohol mean to me that now I can't do it? So what do I do?
Yeah. No, it's been, we've had our journeys with it. You definitely, have abstained from it. Obviously before pregnancy more than I have. Usually it was a means to get to a goal. Yeah. Right. Rather than just, I'm just going to quit doing it.
Right.
But, I'm excited about this year and being able to, again, I always want to be the person that I want to coach. I want to be an example for my clients. And that comes with making these sacrifices, if you will. I don't want to call them sacrifices, just changes in your life, especially at 40. I'm going to be 42 next month. Like,
right. It's our birthday month next month.
Yeah, it is. You guys know that we're only 13 days apart, but like 7 years apart. My best friend Melissa and Amanda have the same birthday, which explains a lot. Yes, you guys are the same.
I think you told me that before.
Yes, and it explains everything. Because you're both the same person in my life. She used to rescue me from frat parties when I was too drunk and I had to get out of there. And she was like, I'll come get you. I'm like, thank you. Yeah.
You're fine.
Yeah. So awesome. Well, hopefully you guys can take some of this insight. Also, we want you to find balance, right? If you are someone who just does struggle with alcohol intake, if you do feel like it is something that you need more guidance over, we will link some resources for you in the show notes below. It is no shame in your game to say, I am controlled by this thing and I need more help than the tips that you provide. We would love for you to use some of these resources for yourself. But hopefully for those of you who are kind of like in my space, you're thinking, okay, like I can make small changes to this and those changes will build up over time. And eventually we'll get to a place where we're feeling good and we're not having the hangover or the, these adverse effects, especially from chronic consumption. Yeah. Please give us a follow on all our socials. They will be linked below. If you like this, again, we'd love for you to give us a 5-star rating and review. Don't forget, our group coaching program is starting this month, and you can find information on that in the show notes below. And if you black out and you forget everything from this podcast, we just want you to try to remember one last thing.
What you say in the mind,
you see in the mirror. Bye.
Bye.